behalf of our board, I thank you all very much for being here tonight. And I'm very pleased that we have a very special guest tonight, author, journalist, and respected historian, Richard Brookhiser, who's here to talk about his book on John Trumbull. Without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Richard's good friend, Peter Travers. Peter.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. Rick, thank you for being here. Welcome to all of you. I appreciate your coming out to this event this evening, which is the inaugural, means the first, Cadwallader Lecture, in what we believe will be a series over time where we invite distinguished authors and others to come and talk about the great events, heroes, principles of the American Revolution and the Princeton battlefield, a battle in particular. You know, the 250th anniversary of the battle is coming up in a couple years. We like to say it's the semi-quin, or semi-quincentennial, just because that sort of thing amuses us, but the semi-quin is coming up, and the Battlefield Society, yes?
Can you step closer to the mic?
Is that better?
Yeah.
I could just shout, but all right. The 250th is coming soon, and the Battlefield Society has a number of programs that it is currently working on and that is promoting going forward to celebrate, promote, educate about the Princeton battle, which, as you know, and as you will, if you don't, you'll find out soon, was exceptionally important moment in the American Revolution. One of the biggest projects we have is we call Washington's Legacy, which is to refurbish in significant ways the battlefield itself so that it's more user-friendly, more accurate to what it looked like at the time, and in many ways allow it to perform its function as an educational device. But tonight we have a treat. Before I get into that, let me go back a bit and talk a little bit about how America is seen, particularly the Europeans. I'm drawn to Otto von Bismarck, who, as you know, was the Iron Chancellor of Germany, so-called, in the late 19th century. And he kind of had this odd fascination with America. He kind of liked it and he kind of didn't like it, but he was astounded by it, as many have been. And he said famously that God protects idiots, drunkards, children, and the United States of America. I'm not entirely 100% sure what he meant by that, but I do feel blessed that I'm probably in a couple of those categories, so it's fine by me. But I think it's interesting for us to feel blessed this afternoon to be joined by a historian of the early years of the American Republic who has done as much as anyone has done to explain and celebrate the vision and the sacrifices that would justify Bismarck's aphorism. Rick Brookhiser has not only written more than a dozen books about America's founders, Washington, Adams, Hamilton, but also Marshall, Governor Morris. He's written and hosted numerous documentary films. His book on Alexander Hamilton and the related exhibition at the New York Historical Society really sparked the renewed interest in Hamilton. Rick is just, I think, widely regarded as the go-to historian on the Founding Fathers, and we're very happy to have him. Rick has been editor-in-chief of National Review and continues now as a senior editor there. He has published in many magazines and periodicals. He's been a columnist for many decades, and he continues to write a column for National Review, actually two, which are one of my favorites. One is called City Desk, and the other is Country Life, and you can guess and imagine how good they are and how interesting they are. In 2008, Rick was awarded the National Humanities Medal by President George Bush, and we at the Princeton Battlefield Society are very honored to have Rick discussing Trumbull's Glorious Lessons this evening. Rick.
Thank you, Peter, for that introduction. Can everybody hear? Can everybody hear? This good? Barely. Well, that's no good. How's this? Better? No? How's this?
Much better.
All right, we'll do it this way. I want to thank the Princeton Battlefield Society for having me, and especially my old friend Peter Travers for thinking of this idea and helping to make it happen. And I also want to thank someone who isn't here, my colleague Frank Filicomo, who arranged for all the slides, which we will be seeing over the course of the evening. John Trumbull was born in 1756, and he died in 1843. There were two dominating facts of his life. The first one was that he wanted to draw and paint since he was a child. He grew up in Lebanon, Connecticut, which is in the northwestern corner of the state. His father, Jonathan, was a politician who would become governor of the colony and of the state. There were 6 Trumbull children, 4 boys, 2 girls. John was the youngest. Now, his older sisters, as part of their education as genteel young women, were taught to draw and paint. If you read Jane Austen, you remember that Emma Woodhouse draws. Well, this was the same with Trumbull's sisters. And he recalled as an old man that their artwork was hung over the mantel in the Trumbull family house. And as a boy, he would lie on the floor of the parlor and copy it on the floor. He called it the nicely sanded floor, maybe not after he finished his copying. His father never understood this interest of his. His father wanted his sons to do practical things. He wanted John to be a lawyer. They fought over this for years. John wrote about one of their last arguments. The father tells him yet again, you should be a lawyer. John says, no, lawyers deal with vices, the vices of mankind. I want to glorify Connecticut as artists in ancient Athens glorified their state, Athens. His father said, well, that's a good argument. That shows you'd be a good lawyer. But I think you've left something out. John said, what is that, sir? He said, Connecticut is not Athens. Connecticut wasn't Athens. There was no Athens anywhere in British North America. If you were a talented young artist, and we had a surprising number of them for a little country on the edge of nowhere. Trumbull, Benjamin West, John Singleton Copley, Gilbert Stuart, Charles Wilson Peale and his family. But to learn, all of these people had to go to Europe. There was no place you could learn in this country. So John, he went to England, where he studied with Benjamin West, who had immigrated, made a great success in England. He was George III's history painter, and he taught John and other young Americans who came to London to study with him. John also went to Paris, and this wasn't just learning, it was also looking. It was looking at the collections of great paintings that hung in those two cities. And these experiences in London and Paris filled his intellectual and visual tank for the rest of his life. The second dominating fact about that life was the American Revolution. Britain won the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War, when John was a boy. They drove the French from North America. They acquired colonies all around the world. But this great success had to be paid for. And so the British Empire thought to rationalize its finances. Americans didn't like it because it meant that they were beginning to be taxed by laws passed in London by Parliament, not by their own assemblies here. Then resentment bred reprisals, which bred further resentment. Then in April 1775, the British Army, which was been occupying Boston for a number of years, sent troops out to sweep the countryside to collect weapons and malcontents. And there were 2 battles at Lexington and Concord. New England rose up like a hive, a beehive kicked. Militia units surrounded the British in Boston. John was became the adjutant in a Connecticut regiment commanded by one of his father's friends. He turned 19 years old on June 6th. He was stationed with his unit in Roxbury to the south of Boston. Then 11 days later, he heard an unusual commotion of musket fire and artillery on the other side of the inner harbor, north of Boston, on the heights of Charlestown. And what was going on was this. This painting he did 10 years after the fact. This represents the third final charge of the British up Breed's Hill, what we remember it as Bunker's Hill. The British commander is in the center at the top. That's Lord Howe in the black hat. The American commander is on the left in the blue coat. That's Israel Putnam. There are 20 identifiable figures in the painting. The dead man front and center in the white garment is Joseph Warren. He was a doctor and a patriot, orator, and leader. He had organized the firefight that pursued the British after the battles of Lexington and Concord. He held the rank of a major general, but he wanted to fight in the ranks for this battle. In the third charge, he was shot in the head and killed instantly. The man behind and above him, he's holding a musket up in the air. You can see the barrel at the top of the painting. He is Andrew McClary. He was a major in the Massachusetts militia. He will be killed very soon. The man seated with his head down is Moses Parker, a lieutenant colonel in the New Hampshire militia. He is mortally wounded, and he will die in British captivity. John himself at this time is out of the picture. You can dimly see Boston on the right, a dark shape, and then Roxbury would be behind that. So there's lots of detail in this painting, lots of activity, but what it really represents is irresistible force meets movable object, and the movable object is us. We've been repelling the British through 2 charges, but now we've run out of ammunition, and it's time for the British to pay back. This is a painting of defeat. Now, everybody who saw it at the time or saw it since would know that the British victory here was Pyrrhic. They lost twice as many casualties as the Americans did, and it would affect their tactics throughout the war. But the painting doesn't show that. It shows the moment of defeat. Trumbull starts with a defeat to show that revolution is hard. Revolution is difficult. It isn't all victories. His second painting was of another defeat, the American attack on Quebec, New Year's Eve, 1775. Gallant operation. 2 armies converged on the citadel of Quebec in the dead of winter. But again, the Americans were defeated and had to retreat. Then for his third painting, those 2 battle paintings were done in 1785. His third one, he began the following year. And this was a different subject. It was suggested to him by Thomas Jefferson, and that is this one. Trumbull had been invited by Jefferson to join him in Paris. Jefferson was our minister to France. He said, come to Paris, you can live in my house, no expenses. You can see the Paris art world. Jefferson also liked to collect protégés. He had a good eye for talented young men, and he liked to draw them around him. He was also interested, he was also an aesthete. He was interested in art, so the fact that Trumbull is a patriot and an artist was very interesting to him. Now this is shows the presentation of the Declaration of Independence to the Continental Congress. In the foreground, we have the drafting committee, the 5 men standing at the table. John Adams is in the middle of the painting in the brown suit, but the tallest one is Jefferson. He's also the reddest one. He pops out on this canvas. Between Adams and Jefferson are Roger Sherman and Robert Livingston, and then Benjamin Franklin is on the other side of Jefferson. They're handing the Declaration to John Hancock, who is seated in the chair. And then behind them and around them are 42 other delegates to the Continental Congress. Now, we cannot see the words on Jefferson's piece of paper, but the painting shows us the kind of country that these men hoped to establish. One thing about the painting is that they're all civilians. They're all in civilian dress. There is a war going on. There are battle trophies hanging on the back wall. Those are captured British flags. But all the men here, even if they had had military experience, are dressed in civilian clothes. This is not a revolution being run by its military. The other thing about them is that they're all peers. Some of these men are very wealthy. Robert Morris is sitting in the front row in the light-colored suit, kind of just left of the middle. He was the great merchant prince. Behind him is Charles Carroll of Carrollton. He's the man who's turning around and talking to someone above him. When Charles Carroll signed the Declaration, someone quipped, "There go a few millions." And yet, they are dressed the same as everyone else in the room. Josiah Bartlett is the third from the left, seated at the edge of the painting, and he was a farmer and a doctor from New Hampshire. And I imagine Morris and Carroll's fabrics are better than his, but they're wearing the same sorts of clothing. No one is wearing jewels. No one is wearing gold chains. No one is wearing furs or diadems. These men are all peers. They've also deliberated. This is not a painting like The Oath of the Tennis Court by Trumbull's friend Jacques-Louis David, one of the artists that he would meet in Paris. And that's when the delegates of the Third Estate decided to constitute themselves as a new national legislature. And they're all saluting each other with raised arms. It's a very active, passionate moment. And maybe there have been passions here, but these men have talked it out. They've decided, and now they're going to declare independence. So this is the kind of politics that Trumbull and Jefferson envisage. So this was Trumbull's third painting. He began his fourth and fifth paintings also in the mid-1780s, and these were two American victories. The fourth was the capture of the Hessians at Trenton, and the fifth is this one. This is the death of General Mercer at the Battle of Princeton. I don't have to tell the Princeton Battlefield Society about the Battle of Princeton or its importance. But one thing to notice about this painting is that it is not a specific moment. This is a composite of the action of the battle, and it unfolds from the front to the back. The front shows you the earlier events, the back shows you the later ones. So in the foreground, leaning over his dead horse is General Mercer. He's not surrendering, he's about to be bayoneted to death. This was the very beginning of the battle. As you know, the Americans were coming from Trenton. They were marching to Princeton. They'd escaped from a trap that Cornwallis thought he had set for them outside Trenton. But on the way, they encountered another British force coming to reinforce Cornwallis from Princeton, going in the opposite direction. The British reinforcements encountered General Mercer's brigade in an apple orchard, and Mercer and his men were overwhelmed. The cannoneer on the left being bayoneted is Daniel Neal from a New Jersey regiment. Some of the keys wrongly identify him as a man named Charles Trumbull. Charles Trumbull would own a farm in Brooklyn and die in 1795. But this man is being killed before our eyes. But this is not another defeat, because George Washington is riding in the upper center to rally the troops, the shocked American troops, line them up, reform them, and charge back against the British. Behind him is John Cadwalader, General John Cadwalader, who led a group of Philadelphia volunteers called the Associators. And then behind him is Benjamin Rush, the physician and patriot who had helped rally and organize men to fight in this battle. The British officer who's dying on the right-hand side was a friend of Rush's. This is why Trumbull puts him in the painting. He's Captain William Leslie. Rush met him when he was studying medicine in Edinburgh before the war. And he came too late to save him. Leslie had already died of his wounds before Rush got to the spot where he was. But when General Washington found out about their relationship, he had Leslie buried with military honors. So here we do have a victory, but again, it's not cost-free. There's blood, there's death. Revolutions are hard, and they can take the ultimate sacrifice. Trumbull would do 2 more paintings of surrenders, more formal occasions when armies doff their violence and pretend to be civilized institutions. He did the surrender of Burgoyne at Saratoga and of Cornwallis at Yorktown. And if the revolution was just a military event, that would have been the end of the series. But he does one more, 8, to conclude it. And that is this. This is the resignation of Washington, December 1783. Yorktown happened in October 1781. There was a long period of negotiation before the Treaty of Paris was signed, which was in the summer of 1783. Then the British evacuated New York in November. Washington retook the city. Then he wrote to Congress and said, "What do you want me to do?" Congress was meeting in Annapolis. They had left Philadelphia. And they said, "You should come to us and return to us your commission." So this is the moment when Washington does it. Thomas Jefferson is in this picture. He was a congressman at the time. He is sitting in front of the left jamb of the door on the left. You can see the man with reddish hair. There's some light on his face. Trumbull also put Madison in the room. Madison was a congressman at the time, although he was not there for this event. He was at home in Montpelier on family business. He is standing to the right of the man in the red jacket in front of the right jamb of that door. Now, this is the second scene in Congress. The Declaration was also a political scene of congressmen. And that showed Jefferson handing a piece of paper to our right. This shows Washington handing a piece of paper to our left. So the 2 paintings are like parentheses. The 2 congressional scenes echo and speak to each other. But there's 2 great differences in this painting. One is that many of the men here are in uniform. They're not all civilians. Washington is in uniform. He has officers behind him. And with just a little historical and artistic tweaking, this could be a very familiar scene. It could be Cromwell dismissing Parliament. It could be Napoleon dismissing the Directory. It could be the military men saying, "We've been fighting and bleeding and dying while you've been talking. Enough of that. We're going to run things now." But that's not what's happening here. That's not what this general would ever do. Behind Washington, there's a chair. Chairs can be thrones in paintings. That's one of their symbolic functions. But he's not sitting in it. On the chair is a cloak. It's a reddish-purple cloak. And cloaks and those colors are symbols of royal or imperial power. But Washington's not wearing that cloak. And these are symbols of what he's forswearing, what he's not going to do. He knows his commission never belonged to him. It was Congress's. They gave it to him for a time. Now they've asked it to be returned. And of course, that is what he does. This painting is also different because now we have women. Finally, after 7 paintings, we have women and girls. Up in the gallery there is Martha Washington. She's in the red with the white hair in the middle. She wasn't actually there. She was at Mount Vernon waiting for George to return. To her left is her granddaughter Eleanor Custis, and to her left is Harriet Wadsworth, to whom Trumbull was briefly engaged before she died of tuberculosis. When Trumbull painted this painting in 1830, his own wife, Sarah Trumbull, of 25 years, had just died. So one thing he is doing is reconnecting, bringing women into this story. The girls on the ground floor are the daughters of Charles Carroll, who's the man in the gray suit standing behind them, and he's clasping one of them on the shoulder. Their names were Mary and Patsy. They're 5 and 13 years old. And the women are here to show that this is what revolutions must be about. If they're not about peace and ordinary life, then they're robbery and murder. They're just sick men turning over in bed for a new round of oppression and tyranny. So this is what Trumbull envisions for America and what he believed America had achieved. So that's my talk on the 8 paintings. Now Peter is going to grill me.